Hi, my name is JC.
And my name is Juan. Welcome to The Couch, a podcast where real therapists talk about real things.
Please remember that we are therapists, but we are not your therapists, and this podcast is intended for educational purposes only.
Mm. Welcome to season 2. How are you, JC?
I'm feeling good. Season one is in the bag, season two is going. It's a good
It
time.
is. It's a good time, and hopefully, as everyone's listening in to the Couch podcast, you're taking in nuggets, you're growing. And what I like about like you go from season 1 to season 2, a lot of that highlights life where you don't feel this necessity to get everything done. It's okay to acknowledge that it's not a sprint; it's a marathon.
Ooh, love that. It's always a really good token. And, you know, slowing down, there's nothing negative about that in taking your time because however long it takes you to do a satisfactory job, that's really however long you should take.
Absolutely. And and that goes right into what today's episode for season 2 is about. But before that, let's highlight the overall theme for season 2. You want to break that down, JC?
Absolutely. So, season one, we gave you kind of an overview of mental health as a whole, and season two is all about relationships. We're going to be talking about the anatomy of a relationship, the different types of relationships, and how they impact your mental health, and the things that you can do to embrace and empower yourself in the relationships you create.
Mm, powerful. It's something that I think most of us we have an upbringing, we have a story, and individuals that support us, through our ups and downs and leave marks on us, some good, some not so good. And a lot of that, it creates that makeup of how we show up in relationships, whether it be with ourselves or the relationships that we have with others.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Something that I always like to bring up when I'm talking about relationships is that your foundation for how you build relationships is going to be a little bit more fluid than your traditional idea of a foundation because not all of us were fortunate enough to grow up in examples of healthy relationships. And as we get older, we kind of have to unlearn those toxic habits or unlearn those negative traits that make it hard for us to connect with other people. And while it is incredibly difficult work, it's really rewarding to acknowledge what you've gone through in other relationships and apply better and more, I guess,
Yeah,
healthier
good word.
things to your relationships in the future.
Yeah. What wonderful word there, healthy. I think as you're going in there, it makes me think about so many individuals I've worked with and even my own personal work as far as I go to this movie. I'm a dad, so my kids watch Disney and items in that area, and it's
Mm-hmm.
Moana, right? Moana's got Dwayne Johnson in it, The Rock, and
Mm-hmm.
he's got um, Maui, I believe. He's got all these tattoos on him, and the
Mm-hmm.
tattoos highlight events or incidents in his life. And I think that we are built in a very similar manner where we have all of these tattoos, and they show up in how we build our relationships. They show up maybe with our struggle to have boundaries or our struggle
Mm-hmm.
to acknowledge that this is a red flag and that's a green flag, or this is my autonomy, or I'm in a codependent relationship. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
often due to all of those marks, all of those tattoos that we receive throughout life. And hopefully, we dive into today's episode, episode 1 of season 2, what makes up a relationship. And you're able to take a step back and look at what JC and I are going to go through. And it's the components of a successful relationship.
Yeah, I love the way that you phrased it. Like, we wear these stories of how we've gone through relationships. And I don't know if you're familiar with tattoo culture specifically, but as a person who has quite a few tattoos, I've thought about getting one covered up that I don't particularly like. And while we do wear the story of the things that we have experienced in our previous relationships, you can get those less those less attractive tattoos covered, right? Like you can change the narrative and change the picture. So, just
Yeah.
another thing to think about because it's important.
Absolutely. Good word there. Another thing to think about. That's something that, as you're listening in, you can continue to give yourself that space, that grace of, all right, how can I reflect here? How can I pause for a moment? Let's see. So I'm excited, JC. I love working in the area of relationships, whether it's
Hmm.
relationships with yourself, like building that self love, building that autonomy, that empowerment, or relationships with those in your space, your friends, your coworkers, your neighbor that can be grumpy every so often, your partner,
Hmm.
lover, really looking at those areas. And I think about the components of a successful relationship as maybe what most individuals can really visualize. And it's this fabric. And the fabric, you're weaving in like patches. And each
Hmm.
patch represents maybe trust, maybe respect, maybe common interest. So I want to toss the ball to you from
Hmm.
your end. What do you see some of these successful components needed in a relationship?
I think that I want to use the word compatibility, but compatibility is so broad and overarching. I think I'll I'll stick to like the smaller idea of sharing common interests.
Hmm.
You and your partner, whoever that person is, not just romantically, but you and your friends even, do not have to have all of the same interests. You don't have to like all of the same things, but you need to have an understanding of one another to embrace them authentically. So, as an example, I'm a big gaming person, love video games, and like my friends are also gamers because that's a way that we spend time together, but I also have friends who don't play video games at all, and I respect their interests. I respect the things that they enjoy doing because they're my friends and I appreciate them for who they are. But that doesn't mean we don't have anything in common at all. Maybe we listen to the same types of music. Maybe we enjoy the same types of activities. Like we like to go hiking. We like to drive around and play our music real loud. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You just have to have something that connects the two of you,
Yeah.
and getting out of that fixed mindset of all of my friends have to be just like me or my
Hmm.
partner has to agree with me 100% on everything, with the exception of very big deal breaking topics, sometimes like religion or politics. You guys don't have to do all of the same things together as long as you have a respect for each other's interests and ideas.
Yeah, that's certainly an important one to have in there with it. And I think you threw this word in there. I think one of the components needed in a healthy relationship is awareness. And it's an interesting
Hmm.
one because sometimes we go to like trust, right? We need to have trust, we need to have respect. And yes, JC and I are going to touch on those. Awareness, though, I think it's one that we skip over. When you really think about your relationship with your friends, with yourself, with your significant other, whoever that variable is, that's that person, you also need to be able to take a step back and hold awareness in connection to, are all of the other components of the relationship, are they highlighted? So I'll break down an example here. Let's say that I really struggle with boundaries, and maybe I don't know this because I've had this really rough upbringing, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm in this relationship. And I wouldn't call it toxic. You would, though. You're looking at it, your peers around me. But I wouldn't call it toxic because I came from a really difficult past history. I mean, my relationships were 10 out of 10 toxic. This one's a 4.
Ooh.
So,
Mm-hmm.
things are great. However, everyone around me goes, no, even a point 1 out of 10, you don't want to be in that space. If I lack awareness, how am I going to know? And that's where this
Mm.
skill of awareness is important to harness, to be able to work with someone, a counselor, someone in your space that can shed light not only on what are the healthy components in a relationship, but how do we spot them? How do we look for them? And then how do you build upon them? How do you polish them?
I love this take that you have given us. I especially love the concept of awareness being used as a tool for protection. Um, Awareness is another one of those components that's important for individual development. In healthy relationships, each person involved is going to be very aware of themselves. And awareness does not mean that you have to be, hyper vigilant about the way that you do things and consistently walking on eggshells, because honestly, healthy,
Mm-hmm.
a component not included in healthy relationships is eggshells. You shouldn't have to walk on
Yeah,
eggshells
yeah,
around your partner. Um, but you need to understand yourself in order to interact with people in a way that truly allows you to put your best foot forward. And
yeah.
having that awareness is going to allow you to be close to others in that way.
Correct. And just to flip the coin real quick, you threw out eggshells. So the healthy term that we look for there is safety.
Mm,
You being able to walk through, whether it's a relationship with your parents, with whoever that variable is, that person is, with yourself, and being able to express your thoughts, express your feelings, discuss your independence with that feeling of safety. And you know that there's a struggle when you hold back. And holding back is
hmm
not biting your tongue. That's different. That's different than picking your battles. This really goes deep into your core. It connects to your values. When you're holding those back, think things are going in the wrong direction.
hmm That concept of safety is especially applicable, I think, to parent and child relationships. As parents, you get the privilege and the honor of keeping your children safe. It's a part of your job as a parent, and we often think of like physical safety, walk, look both ways before you cross the street, hold my
Hmm.
hand when we're walking, don't talk to strangers. But emotional safety is a much more complex and difficult thing for people to understand, because some people have the idea that as long as I'm feeding you and clothing you and making sure you get to school on time, that's all you need. And relationships that are truly thriving have an element of safety. Your kids should be able to come and tell you difficult things and not fear the response. But that's really hard to do, like you said, because some people didn't grow up with that as a modeled behavior. And when you don't have good modeled behaviors, you can't carry them into the other relationships in your life.
Absolutely. It's interesting you throw that in with relationships. And I love that you did, because I do think maybe as a majority, we as a population, we pinpoint more of those behaviors that go into feeling safe from a point of protection. And it's interesting. I'll share clinically. I've worked with a good amount of individuals, read literature, case studies, where, and I'll give you an example as to listeners what sticks out to you. You have like this adult child, and the adult child maybe says to the parent, I never heard you say, I love you." Right. And
Mm,
then the parent then looks at the kid, the adult child, and goes, well, you had a roof over your head, you had plenty of food,
mm,
you had this, you had that.
mm-hmm,
And it's not a battle, right? It's not let's play ping pong. There's something deeper being said there, and it's looking for the emotional connection that that child was seeking. Going back to the term that I utilized there, awareness. I think that allows you to tap into that. But I
mm-hmm.
don't want to go too deep in here. Let's pull back for a moment and kind of keep
Yeah.
hitting these items of um, a healthy relationship.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about compatibility on a surface level. Let's talk about attraction in a romantic sense. Like, let's talk about being attracted to and into the person that you're with. And attraction can mean different things. It doesn't just have to be sexual. You can be intellectually attracted to the person that you're with. There has to be some level of a desire to connect with one another in successful and healthy relationships. It can't be the only thing that you connect with and like get in touch with and in tune with, because that's not sustainable. However, it is really important to have.
Absolutely. There's like the law of attraction, and that word attraction is popular out there. You find a good amount of TikToks and Instagram posts on
Yeah.
it. I do agree with you. I think that's an important item when it comes to a healthy relationship, and attraction not solely on physical attraction, right? You can have
Hmm.
attraction when you see your partner and you're ordering a meal and they show a level of respect and integrity. You could be
Yeah.
attracted to that. You could be attracted to your partner when they maybe hold your hand right before crossing the street, right? That could build something there for you. So taking that time to really dig into like, what does attraction mean to me? I find that helpful. There's a term that I wrote down here, and it's interesting. I was thinking about this podcast episode on healthy components in a relationship. So I always like to cross reference just to kind of see what else is out there in the literature. And
Hmm.
I found this item on the John Hopkins University website. So they had 12 elements of a healthy relationship, and they had fun on there. And I thought about that, and I said,
Hmm.
that's that's one that is often overlooked. It's
Yeah.
interesting from the clinical space, many individuals, and this is like the history of psychology. It's rooted on what's wrong
Hmm.
versus what's right. Right? It was later. Was it Adler? Is that right? Or is that
Yes.
wrong? Okay, right. Positive psychology.
Yes.
Okay, hopefully we're on the same
Yeah.
page there.
I'm pretty sure you are. I'll fact check. I'll fact
Okay,
check us
I was
real
thinking
quick.
that
So
or
keep going.
Rogers, one of those. Now, not the full point there. The key item that I want to share is that element of a healthy relationship where you and the person you're building a relationship, it could be yourself, it could be your parent, it could be your significant other, incorporating fun, right? Fun is what we fun is what we see in children, right? Children go to a park and they're strangers and they get to know each other and they push each other in the swing while knowing nothing about the other person. Fun
Hmm.
is being able to cheerfully be excited to see the other person while knowing that there's still issues you haven't addressed yet, while still knowing that things aren't perfect. And if that's one area that I can really encourage listeners to devote energy and commitment to, it's fun. It's looking at what brings you calmness, peace, tranquility, excitement, fulfillment, satisfaction, passion, energy, that fun, and bringing that consistently into your life and into your relationship.
I love this. I love that example, especially of children playing. Also, you and I are both loud and wrong, because it was Maslow.
Maslow
We
and his
think
hierarchy.
yes. However, comma, Adler does talk a lot about family and birth order in Adlerian theory, and we'll touch on that later in the season as we talk more in depth about family relationships. But it was our good friend Maslow, which actually is a really good place to pivot because one of the things we really haven't answered is why do we want to be in relationships in the first place? Like, why do we need to have relationships? And we can point to our good man Maslow and his hierarchy. One of the components of Maslow's good old hierarchy is this idea of like love and belonging, and it's pretty high up there on the hierarchy of things. As a matter of fact, it's only two below self actualization, which is the pinnacle. And you can give Maslow's hierarchy a give it a Google if you would like, so that you can see the pyramid. But
Mm.
friendships, intimacy, family, sense of connection, and a sense of community and belonging are all incorporated in this idea of love and belonging. We seek relationships because it is fundamentally a part of who we are. And even the most introverted of us, the people who are the lone wolves, the folk who can sit in a room in silence by themselves for hours, they still want to experience some sort of connection. And we find ourselves being driven to fulfill those needs in our relationships. And if we've experienced dysregulated or disordered patterns of affection, if we're used to toxic relationships, if we're used to poor treatment by our loved ones, we're going to seek out those things in our personal relationships, not because it's what we want at the core of our being,
Hmm.
but it's all we know.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about these things like awareness and personal growth and, honestly, accountability, the
Yep. Yep.
reason that we're asking you to do so much personal work when it comes to your relationship is because you may be seeking out unhealthy things and not even be aware of it. You may be you know, doing these things that are really messing up your groove, or really just messing up the way that you seek love and seek validation from others, because it's a pattern, not a desire.
That's powerful there. I like to sit back and listen as you're sharing, just really thinking about life experiences and how they mold into that. And maybe for some listeners, that can be quite challenging, kind of to swallow that and go, okay, that makes sense on why I'm showing up in that way. And if that's accurate, one of the key items that you're going to want to give yourself as you move forward is a level of compassion, a
Mm-hmm.
level of self-love and acceptance to say, okay, this is where I'm at, and really steer away from that inner critic, uh, and more to that self-compassion that'll allow you to begin that process of working and slowly channeling through those heavy waters.
Yeah, it's a hard road to hoe, to be completely honest. Um, People don't necessarily put a lot of thought into how they're making their relationships. Like, I think therapists definitely do it. They're like, okay, is this healthy? Is it whatever? Because that's what we do all day, every day for others.
Hmm.
Um, but for folk who don't do this for a living, sitting down with yourself and saying, is my relationship healthy? Am I in a healthy place in my relationship? What are my roles in the conflicts in the relationships that I have? Sitting down with yourself in that way is, it's tough. It's
Yeah,
tough
yeah.
and it's not fun, but
Mm-mm.
oh god, is it so rewarding. I like to think of any relationship that you come upon, um being kind of not you looking for someone who completes you, but two or more whole people looking to enrich each other's lives by their closeness. And once you start thinking of your relationships in that way, as opposed to, I need to find the person who completes me, I need to find the person who makes me feel better, I need to find the person who can fix all of the bad, yucky, awful things that have happened in my life, you find yourself choosing partners, friends, and honestly, sometimes even your loved ones who are better for you, who
Yeah.
are closer to you, and who allow you to really grow uninhibited by the fear of the past.
Mm. And all of that, right, connects to that question of why do we want to be in relationships in the first place? I
Yeah,
think as
why do
you're
we want it?
and maybe so, I think with this question, there's literature, and you're highlighting literature that goes into, here's what theories are saying. My brain goes to a few places, and one is
Hmm.
the person themselves, right? So like I like to sit with individuals and ask this very question, why do you want to be in a relationship in the first place? And allowing there to be, that word vomit, just things to come out. And sometimes when they come out, we even go, wow, I said that. And it could be, I don't want to be alone. And
Hmm.
there's no judgment there. It's keep going. Or I want to share my life with, that person. Or I want to go on adventures. And all of that, it's important to just throw on the table, put it all on the table and explore each one. If it's, well, I don't want to be alone, I'm not saying right away we're going to say that's negative, right? Then there's a lot of items on online on social media that I think put this negative connotation on it. So if you're sharing, well, I want to be in a relationship because I don't want to be alone, it doesn't have to be a bad thing,
Hmm.
right? It could be a very powerful thing to say. Well, great. You don't want to be alone. You want to share your life with somebody. That's wonderful. Versus you don't want to be alone. Does that mean that now you struggle with that space of being alone? Not necessarily.
Hmm. Yeah. And it goes back to that self compassion too, of, what does it mean to not want to be alone? And if it's this much of an issue for you, if it's causing you distress and it's causing you to fall into those toxic relationships or continue those unhealthy patterns of relationship seeking, how can you work towards being okay with being alone? And how can you work towards regulating those feelings of loneliness and finding fulfillment that actually makes you feel better, and not like superficial relationships, superficial and superfluous things to fill the loneliness so that you don't feel bad.
Yeah. And here, so I'm going to tie a little literature here where um, when we do look at why we want to be in relationships, I do think it's important to highlight the term social connections. So that's, us belonging to like social groups, and it could be a family system, a peers that you kick it with. Now, from this term itself, if we look at literature, and this comes from the APA, there was a study where it looked at the increase, decrease, the pros and cons, if you will. And I'm going to pull it here. So what it found was with social connection, social relationships increase the likelihood of survival by 50%. And this was from a study of 148 individuals. Excuse me, a meta-analysis of 148 studies on
Mm.
mortality risk. The study was by Holt Lundstad, if you want to look that up, at Brigham Young University. So from there, we see, okay, there's that positive element. And if we look at the other end, they found social disconnection is at least as harmful to people. And then there, the risks that they found: obesity, physical inactivity. And then, interesting enough, smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. And this I'm pulling
Huh.
from the APA. Now, as I'm looking at this, there's two elements that I'm thinking about. One is my own education. So the information I see in front of me is consistent with a lot of the literature that I've read, where it goes
Hmm.
into the importance of social connection. And I think you can agree with that, JC, where
Yeah.
it's important for us, right, to build relationships. There's a strong
Yes.
connection to mortality, to living a healthy life, and healthy all the way from physical health, cardiovascular health, not solely mental health. And then on the other end, social disconnection, that one bringing things downhill. And I'll share
Hmm.
this one last item, then I'll give you the mic. I was watching on Netflix a show on centariums. I think that's the term. So I'm assuming he must have been like a sociologist, like somebody in that area. He
Hmm.
went and found these blue zones. So individuals that are living like 80, 90, years old and older. As one really cool, funny item that I saw, and there was this guy. He's like, I think he's like 80 plus, and he's just getting on this horse. And he's like, yeah, you got to keep working. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can get on a horse. I'm only in my 30s, but he just did it, like just youthful. So he studied all of these places across the world, looking at why are these individuals living, you know 70, 80, 90, all the way up there. The big question that most of us ask as researchers, right? The
Yeah.
why, the how, the what.
Why?
um, so they found nutrition, of course. They found physical activity, and then they found this one here: social connections, community. So if you get a chance, if you have Netflix, there's no sponsorship here, but I think that's a nice resource there. Just something else to shift your attention to identify the importance of having healthy relationships.
Yeah, and honestly, that community piece is so important. We see a lot of like non-Western cultures or non-American cultures that have elders in these communities that are like 90 plus, people that are in their hundreds. And a lot
Hmm.
of the time it comes down to that connectivity, because not only do they have a solid support system, so like, when we talk about social connections, we're not just talking about, oh yeah, they've got somebody to talk to every couple of days. But these are folk who have access to people in the community who will take them to the hospital if they need that, who will help feed them and give them the things that they need to continue living a life. And in return, they pour into the community with their wisdom and their age and things of that nature. But we could talk about how important elders are to the community for
Yeah.
hours. So we'll we'll backtrack. We'll take a
Yeah.
couple steps back, and I think a good way to cap off our conversation about relationships is talking about what types of relationships there are.
Hmm.
Um, some people may hear us using the word relationship, which we have used a billion times this episode, and we'll use a billion more times this season, and they think about romantic relationships. But there are platonic relationships, familial relationships. So, relationships in your family, platonic being your friendships and non sexual close relationships,
Hmm.
romantic relationships involving romance and sometimes a sexual component, social relationships, coworkers, peers, classmates, parasocial relationships, which are you familiar with parasocial relationships? Because it's one of
Tell
my
me.
favorite things. So, parasocial relationships are one sided relationships, and oftentimes we use the word in a sociological sense to talk about the relationships between like celebrities and their fans.
Okay.
Um, so parasocial relationships being, the Beehive, Beyonce fans,
Gotcha.
very much so one sided. Because the thing about it is that it's not just like unrequited where this other person knows you exist. A parasocial relationship is you may know everything about this person, this celebrity, this band, this painter, but they don't even know you exist.
Mm.
And it can be really unhealthy.
Yeah.
Uh, and healthy parasocial relationships are hard to come by, but we could talk more about that later on in the season. Knowing where you stand in your relationship and knowing what types of relationships you have, it's not just a cool thing to know so that you can flash it around and be like, oh, yes, I have multiple platonic relationships, because nobody talks like that. Not typically, anyway. If you do, I'm not knocking it, please. But also, you don't hear it every day. Knowing where you stand is what's going to help you interact in appropriate level. Your coworkers might not be your best friends. Your classmates may not be interested in close physical contact like a romantic partner might be. And your romantic partner may not enjoy the way that you treat your friends and may feel slighted if you decide to start treating them, on the same level as everyone else. So the hierarchy of relationships is important to understand.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's not a conversation that I've had too many times, to be honest with you, where there's like a discovery of, here's each space for each of these relationships. Because if we're looking at them, we can think about, I guess, like common language would be like I have my relationship with my coworkers, right? I
Mm-hmm.
have I have, I have my romantic relationship with my significant other, and each of them perhaps, let me know what you think. Each of them perhaps may have a different foundation, like
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit different, right? If your color is green, maybe there's different shades of green in each of those, and that could be coined as the level of access to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's, I'm a big believer in this, and really looking at your autonomy and thinking about who has access to you. Does everyone have that deep level of vulnerable access to you, or does there need to be like a relationship built, and then layer after layer, you make that choice on who you want to let in closer and closer.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps in each of these spaces, as you're listening in, you can dig further and identify what's the foundation there, identify boundaries, trust, attraction, all of those words. And some of them may not fit. What do you think about that, JC?
I think that is so, so appropriate. I'm even willing to like give you a little bit more in saying that you have to understand how you define those relationships as well. Some people hold hands with their friends, some people don't. Some people will share a bed with their friends, some people won't. Some people think that kissing your family members when you're in a romantic relationship is a form of cheating. You have to be so, so aware and understanding of where you and the folk in your relationships lie and where you sit and where you stand, and knowing exactly how you're defining these things, because otherwise you're going to find yourself in a bad way.
Hmm. That's like a moment to pause, kind of just think, am I Am I in that space? Putting myself in the space of a listener. So yeah, good episode. Good episode. Season 2, episode 1. What makes up a relationship? How'd you feel about it?
I'm honestly so excited to continue talking about this because I know that this is like a huge part of the work that you do in your couples work, but it's a huge part of the work that I get to do with individuals as well, helping them figure out what types of relationships they want to have. So, talking
Yeah,
more about it, I'm super jazzed.
there we go. Excitement leads the way. And before we finish for this episode, let's see. Episode 2, we're going to be diving into it starts at home, familial relationships, relationships with the familia. And before we head off today, let's do our personal growth challenge. You want to go first or second?
You know what? I'll take the charge. I would take the charge for your personal growth challenge at the end of this episode. I would like for you to sit down with somebody that you are close with, someone that you think you're close with, and have a conversation with them about how your relationship's going. Just check in with them, your friends, hey, how's our relationship? Are you happy? Are you good? Are we good? Do a little check in.
Mm, yeah, that's a great question for people to really go into. You may be surprised. Sometimes information, whether it's up or down, can be very, very helpful in life. Hard to
It can be
receive,
helpful.
but helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Also, don't fight me if something challenging comes out of
Yeah.
this conversation. Like, please do not fight me. I just want you to do a little check in with your friends, make sure you're good.
Yeah. Good start there. Let's see. My personal growth challenge for you in this conversation of what makes up a relationship is I want you to dig into your values. Think about the values that really highlight who you are as a person. Things like creativity, wellness, maybe religion, whatever it may be, jot those down. And next, as you jot them down, I always want you to be mindful. Open up those eyes, open up those ears, and keep your heart open and scan your relationships. Scan the relationship with yourself. That's a key one. With all the individuals that you connect with, that you kick it with, and see how many of those values are. How many of the you got a little light switch. How many of the values have the light switch on in those
Mm,
spaces, and how many of them have the light switch off? And then let that be something that you pay attention to, and then you decide what you want to do with that.
I like that. I like that a lot.
All right, my friends, we appreciate you spending time with us. Like, share, subscribe, send this to somebody that you think would find it of support. We'll see you in the next episode.
See ya.